A single cruel comment can change lives forever. At Bellini's, the city's most prestigious restaurant, 16-year-old Noah Matthews sits rigid with humiliation as a waiter publicly mocks his autism. The other diners avert their eyes, pretending not to notice the teenager's distress or his mother's helpless anger. No one intervenes, except for one man observing from the shadows. Hollywood icon Keanu Reeves rises from his private corner table, his expression transforming from quiet contemplation to fierce resolve. When the acclaimed actor steps forward, no one could anticipate how his next actions would not only rescue a shattered evening but spark a movement that would transform an entire community's understanding of difference, dignity, and the extraordinary power of standing up for those who struggle to stand up for themselves. Hayley Matthews had been saving for 3 months to take her son Noah to Bellini's. It wasn't just any Friday night dinner. It was Noah's 17th birthday. The restaurant's crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over white tablecloths and polished silverware. The soft murmur of conversation and occasional laughter created an atmosphere of refined enjoyment that Hayley hoped would make this evening special. Noah sat across from his mother, his fingers methodically arranging and rearranging the silverware. At 17, he had a thoughtful face with intelligent hazel eyes that noticed details others missed. His autism meant he experienced the world differently. Sounds could be overwhelming, textures fascinating, and social cues sometimes puzzling. But tonight, Noah was trying his best to follow the restaurant script his mother had practiced with him all week. The chandeliers have exactly 64 crystal pieces each, Noah observed, his eyes tracking the light patterns on the ceiling. And the music is Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Spring movement. Hayley smiled. Noah's ability to notice such specific details never ceased to amaze her. That's right, honey. Are you comfortable? Is the music too loud? Noah shook his head. It's at 62 decibels. That's acceptable. Their waiter approached, a thin man with slicked back hair and a perpetual look of impatience. His name tag read, Martin. He handed them menus with a cursory explanation of the specials, his gaze never quite meeting Noah's. In the corner, partially obscured by an elegant floral arrangement, sat a man with kind eyes and shoulder-length dark hair. Though dressed casually in black jeans and a simple blazer, there was something immediately recognizable about him. A few patrons had already done double takes, but the staff maintained a professional distance. Celebrities weren't uncommon at Bellini's, and Keanu Reeves clearly appreciated the rare opportunity to enjoy a meal without fanfare. Keanu sipped his water, occasionally glancing toward Noah's table. There was something about the teen that caught his attention. The careful way he studied the menu, the focused conversation with his mother. Without realizing it, Keanu found himself watching as the evening began to unfold in an unexpected direction. Noah studied the menu with the concentration of a scholar examining an ancient text. Each dish description triggered a cascade of questions in his mind. "Excuse me," Noah said when Martin returned. "For the chicken marsala, what kind of mushrooms do you use? Are they button mushrooms or cremini? And is the sauce reduced with actual marsala wine or cooking wine?" Martin's smile tightened. "It's just mushrooms. And yes, real marsala. But different mushrooms have different flavor profiles," Noah explained, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "Button mushrooms are mild, but cremini have an earthier taste. Also, does the chicken have antibiotics? I read that." "Look, kid," Martin cut him off. "The chef knows what he's doing. Just pick something." Hayley intervened gently. "Noah is very particular about food textures and ingredients. It helps him make decisions." Martin glanced at his watch. "Well, I have 3 other tables waiting." Noah, undeterred, moved to the next menu item. "For the salmon, is it wild-caught or farm-raised? Farm-raised salmon has more fat marbling and a different omega-3 content. Also, is it Atlantic or Pacific? Pacific has a higher." "For God's sake," Martin muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "It's just fish. It swims, we cook it." Several diners glanced over. An uncomfortable silence fell around their section. Noah's fingers began tapping rapidly on the table, a self-soothing mechanism Hayley recognized immediately. "My son is autistic," Hayley said in a low, controlled voice. "These questions help him feel comfortable with his food choices." Martin rolled his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm sure your son is very special, but this is a busy restaurant, not a science class." He turned to Noah with exaggerated slowness. Can you just pick something simple? Each word dripped with condescension. Noah's face flushed crimson. His breathing quickened as he tried to process the social hostility directed at him. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know about every single ingredient and probably where the chef went to school too, right? Martin's voice rose mockingly. Should I get the chicken's birth certificate while I'm at it? A few tables away, Keanu Reeves set down his fork. His casual dinner had been pleasant until now, but something about the waiter's tone had cut through the ambient restaurant noise. He watched as the teenager seemed to fold inward, shoulders hunching protectively while his mother's expression hardened with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. That's enough, Haley said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. I'd like to speak with your manager, please. Look, no offense meant, Martin backpedaled unconvincingly, but most people just order without the 20 questions. He gestured at the crowded restaurant. Some of us are trying to work here. Noah's hands now covered his ears, his eyes squeezed shut against the overwhelming emotions. Several nearby diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. An older couple exchanged disapproving glances, while others pretended not to notice the unfolding scene. It was at that precise moment that Keanu stood up, napkin placed gently on his table. His movement was calm but purposeful as he made his way across the restaurant floor, unnoticed at first by either Haley or Noah, but capturing the attention of nearly everyone else in the room. Excuse me, a gentle voice interrupted. I couldn't help overhearing. Martin turned, his irritation vanishing instantly as he recognized who stood before him. His mouth opened slightly, then closed without forming words. Keanu Reeves, Haley whispered, equally stunned. Keanu smiled briefly at Haley before addressing Martin. I've been sitting over there for about 40 minutes now, he said, gesturing toward his table. And I noticed something interesting. This young man's questions? They're thoughtful, detailed. He's paying attention to things most people ignore. Martin shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Reeves, I was just explaining that you're busy. I understand. Keanu's tone remained conversational, but carried an unmistakable firmness. But here's the thing. I asked questions about my meal too. About ingredients. About preparation. The difference was, when I asked, you smiled. You took time. You called it discerning taste. The restaurant had grown quieter, many diners now watching the exchange. Noah slowly lowered his hands from his ears, his eyes opening to see who had intervened. May I? Keanu gestured to the empty chair at their table. Haley nodded, still processing what was happening. Keanu sat down, turning his attention fully to Noah. I heard you asking about mushrooms. That's actually really smart. I worked at a restaurant when I was younger, and the chef always said different mushrooms changed the whole dish. Noah blinked in surprise. They do. Cremini mushrooms have more umami flavor because they're actually baby portobellos. I didn't know that, Keanu replied with genuine interest. That's cool. A man in a tailored suit approached the table, clearly the restaurant manager. Is everything all right here? He glanced nervously between Keanu, Martin, and the Matthews family. Actually, Keanu said, I think there might be a misunderstanding about customer service expectations. The manager's professional smile faltered. I'm Anthony Bellini. This is my restaurant. What seems to be the issue? Haley found her voice. Your waiter has been extremely rude to my son because he asks detailed questions about the menu. My son is autistic, and he deserves respect, Keanu finished quietly. The same respect I received when I asked about my meal. Martin's face had drained of color. Mr. Bellini, I was just trying to manage time efficiently with the other tables and decided some customers are worth patience while others aren't? Keanu suggested. Bellini's expression darkened. Martin, take a break. Now. As the waiter retreated, Bellini turned to Noah and Haley. I want to personally apologize. This is absolutely not how we treat guests at my restaurant. Noah looked confused by the sudden shift in everyone's behavior. I just wanted to know about the mushrooms, he said softly. And you deserve those answers, Keanu said, before turning back to Bellini. My younger sister has a sensory processing disorder. Not the same as autism, but there are similarities. Food textures matter. Ingredients matter. When she was younger, restaurants were really hard for our family. The revelation seemed to surprise everyone at the table. Bellini nodded solemnly. Mr. Bellini, Keanu continued, I'd be happy to help answer some of Noah's questions about the menu if you could tell us about the dishes. Of course, Bellini replied, now thoroughly chagrined. And dinner tonight is completely on the house. Haley began to protest, but Bellini raised his hand. I insist. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to learn more about how we can better serve guests with sensory sensitivities. Noah looked up, surprise evident on his face. You want to learn about autism? From me. I can't think of a better teacher, Bellini replied sincerely. Throughout the restaurant, the atmosphere had transformed. What had begun as an uncomfortable scene of public humiliation had somehow morphed into something entirely different. A moment of unexpected connection and understanding, all because one famous bystander refused to remain silent. Martin returned 20 minutes later, his demeanor completely transformed. Under Bellini's watchful eye, he approached the table with a notepad in hand. Mr. Matthews, he began, addressing Noah directly with newfound respect, I owe you an apology. My behavior was inexcusable, and I'm truly sorry. Noah studied Martin's face carefully. Your facial expressions match your words now. Before they didn't. That was confusing. Martin nodded slowly, genuinely intrigued by this observation. You're right. I wasn't being sincere before. About those mushrooms, Bellini interjected. Our chef uses a mix of cremini and porcini in the chicken marsala. The porcini are dried and rehydrated for deeper flavor, while the cremini are fresh sautéed. Noah's eyes lit up. That's a smart combination. Dried mushrooms have concentrated glutamates that enhance umami flavors. Exactly, Bellini smiled. Would you like to meet our chef? She loves discussing techniques with knowledgeable guests. While Noah spoke with Bellini, Keanu turned to Haley. Your son is remarkable, he said quietly. Thank you, Haley replied, still processing the evening's dramatic turn. Not just for saying that, but for stepping in. Most people just stare or judge. Keanu shook his head. I've been that kid, not autistic but different. Quiet. Analytical. People are quick to dismiss what they don't understand. Across the restaurant, something unexpected was happening. The initially uncomfortable atmosphere had given way to something warmer. Several patrons nodded approvingly at the positive resolution. A couple at a nearby table had begun a conversation about their nephew on the autism spectrum. The chef emerged from the kitchen, a woman with bright eyes and a confident stride. She introduced herself to Noah and answered his increasingly specific culinary questions with professional enthusiasm rather than annoyance. You have quite the palate knowledge, she remarked, genuinely impressed. Do you cook? I make very precise recipes, Noah explained. I like measuring exactly. Mom says I make the best chocolate chip cookies because I weigh the ingredients to the gram. That's actually how professional pastry chefs work, she said, her respect evident. Baking is chemistry. Yes. It's exothermic reactions and protein coagulation and Maillard reactions and, Noah stopped himself, suddenly self-conscious. No, please continue, the chef encouraged. I rarely get to discuss the science with guests who understand it. Martin, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward again. I've taken the liberty of preparing a special menu for you, he said, handing Noah a printed card. It lists all ingredients, preparation methods, and even notes potential texture differences between dishes. Noah accepted the menu with wide eyes. This is exactly what I always wish restaurants had. It was Mr. Bellini's idea, Martin admitted, but I helped create it. He hesitated before adding, my cousin's son is on the spectrum. I should have recognized. I should have been more understanding. You're being understanding now, Noah replied simply. Around them, the restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm, but something fundamental had shifted. Several tables had requested similar detailed ingredient lists after overhearing the conversation. Bellini moved between tables, personally ensuring everyone's satisfaction while implementing the impromptu menu accommodation. Keanu had declined Haley's invitation to join them, insisting this was their special night. But he did speak quietly with Bellini before returning to his own table. Whatever was said resulted in Bellini approaching Noah's table with a business proposition. "Noah, would you consider consulting with us? We've been wanting to create accessible menus for guests with various needs, and your perspective would be invaluable." Haley watched her son's face transform with surprise and pride. The same restaurant where he'd been mocked just an hour before was now requesting his expertise. The evening had become a masterclass in human dignity, how quickly it could be stripped away, and how powerfully it could be restored. As they finished their meal, Noah eventually choosing the chicken marsala after his detailed consultation with the chef, Haley noticed her son watching Keanu's table. "Mom," Noah whispered, "do you think it would be okay if I thanked him before we leave?" Haley smiled. "I think he'd appreciate that very much." As Noah approached Keanu's table, Haley held her breath. Social interactions with strangers were often challenging for her son, but he had insisted on expressing his gratitude personally. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves," Noah said, his practiced greeting delivered with careful precision. Keanu looked up with a warm smile. "Hey there, Noah. And please, call me Keanu." "Thank you for helping me," Noah said, his hands fidgeting slightly at his sides. "Most people don't understand why I ask so many questions." "Your questions make perfect sense to me," Keanu replied. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Would you like to sit for a minute?" Noah glanced back at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. He sat down, his posture straight and attentive. "Can I ask you something?" Keanu said. When Noah nodded, he continued, "What's your favorite movie?" "The Matrix," Noah answered immediately. "I've watched it 27 times. The philosophical concepts about reality and perception are fascinating, plus the visual effects use mathematical principles that—" He stopped abruptly. "Sorry. I talk too much about things I like." "No, please continue," Keanu said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "The Wachowskis actually consulted with philosophers when writing it. What mathematical principles did you notice?" What was intended as a brief thank you turned into a 20-minute conversation. Noah explained his observations about the digital rain sequence, how the symbols created patterns that followed specific mathematical rules. Keanu listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed his own deep understanding of the film's technical aspects. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening throughout the restaurant. Martin, the waiter who had initially been so dismissive, was now engaged in a thoughtful conversation with Bellini and the chef. They were redesigning the restaurant's training program on the spot. "We should create sensory-friendly hours," Bellini was saying. "Lower lighting, reduced noise, detailed menu descriptions. I could develop alternative preparations for guests with texture sensitivities," the chef added. "It wouldn't be difficult with advance notice." Martin nodded. "My cousin would bring my nephew here if he knew accommodations were available. They've stopped going to restaurants entirely." Haley watched in amazement as the entire staff became increasingly invested in the impromptu inclusion initiative. The evening's uncomfortable incident had somehow catalyzed genuine change. At Keanu's table, the conversation had shifted to Noah's interests beyond movies. "I program simulations," Noah explained. "Computer models that show how complex systems behave." "Like weather patterns?" Keanu asked. "Sometimes. Right now I'm working on traffic flow optimization. My program shows how changing one intersection affects entire city grids." Keanu's expression revealed genuine surprise. "That's actually incredible. Have you shown this to anyone?" Noah shook his head. "Just my computer science teacher. He said it was neat." "It's way more than neat," Keanu said. "I know people who work in urban planning who would find that fascinating." He hesitated, then added, "Would you mind showing me sometime?" The question caught Noah off guard. "You want to see my program?" "Absolutely. I'm involved with a technology foundation that supports innovative projects. Your work sounds exactly like something we'd be interested in." For the first time that evening, Noah was speechless. As the conversation continued, other diners who recognized Keanu began discreetly taking photos. By morning, social media would be buzzing with images of the famous actor deep in conversation with a teenage boy, their expressions equally animated and engaged. The captions and stories accompanying these images would vary, but each would capture fragments of the remarkable turning point they had witnessed. When Haley finally approached to let Noah know it was getting late, Keanu stood to greet her. "Your son is brilliant," he said simply. "We've been discussing his computer simulation work. It's genuinely innovative." Haley smiled. "He's always seen patterns and connections others miss." "That's a gift," Keanu replied. He handed Haley a business card with a handwritten number on the back. "My foundation works with young innovators. I'd like to connect Noah with our technology director, if that's okay with you." What had begun as a birthday dinner marked by public humiliation had transformed into an unexpected doorway to opportunity. As they prepared to leave, Martin approached one final time. "Mr. Matthews," he said to Noah, "thank you for your patience with me tonight. I've learned something important." Noah studied him carefully before responding. "People can change their minds when they get new information. That's actually very logical." Martin smiled. "I suppose it is." Behind them, Bellini was already implementing changes, instructing his staff on new procedures, drafting notations for the menu, discussing with the chef how they might better accommodate diverse needs. As Noah and Haley walked to the door, a young server stopped them. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "My brother is autistic." Seeing what happened tonight, how everyone adjusted to understand him instead of expecting him to change, it meant a lot to me. Haley squeezed her son's shoulder gently. What had begun as an ordinary birthday dinner had rippled outward in ways neither of them could have anticipated.